Welcome to the official Erdos Miller podcast, where we spend our non-productive time talking about everything drilling tech and getting the latest insight from industry leaders on our show. I'm Ken Miller.
And I'm David Erdos, and today we've brought on an industry leader and a good friend, Hunter Simmons from Gordon Technologies. Welcome, Hunter.
Thank you.
Well, Hunter, it's the end of January. The rig count has been going pretty green, pretty positive. My new joke is as long as it goes up by one per week forever, I'm pretty happy. But how are things going for you and you guys right now?
Well, Gordon is we're accelerating our activity. I think, just to give you guys a reference point, in October we were at like 10,000 circulating hours. That's North America. Today, I think in December, we closed out December at 18,000. We're going to beat that again in January. So we're growing again after that long 2020 slump.
Yeah, that was a not fun slump, right? That's great, and that's doubling from October almost, right? Which is crazy.
Yes.
Yeah. Were you guys thinking we're going to grow, kind of rig count throughout the year? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, we dropped off in March at, I want to say we had 105 follow me rigs, 85 active rigs or active jobs running, and then we got as low as 23 in August or so. And so we have the capacity to run, or the kits to run, 115 jobs. Not the people right now. So we're still spooling up on people to anticipation of this growing market. And we're seeing the growth really happen in the Haynesville right now. Really?
So I'm a little surprised by that, right? Because I guess the natural gas price is going up. It must mean people are expecting that to be for the long term if they're commissioning additional rigs to go to the Haynesville.
That, and there's been a void in the market from Weatherford exiting that area, and it's left a lot of rigs needing work, needing servicers. So we're stepping into that gap.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, and so for those of you who don't know, so Weatherford decided to, did they stop all services in North America, or is it just drilling in NWD? At least drilling in NWD.
At least that.
Yeah, I don't know how much further they went. And so, one of the cool bits of technology that Weatherford, I always have the hardest time with their market acronym, or whatever it's called, initialism.
WFT. Their ticker.
My brain always reverses the T and the F. But anyways, one of the really cool bits of technology they had in their portfolio was the aptly named HEL tool, right? HEL. Right. And I assume that stands for some sort of retro created acronym. And they're like, oh, we can make it less offensive if we just take one L off and just call it the HEL tool with one L. No one's going to be tempted to write heck instead of hell. Right. But anyways, extremely high temperature tool. I mean, I think it was hybrid technology throughout instead of PCB technology. It was kind of a legendary tool, really, right? And I think they decided it was a better business decision for them to take their assets, equipment, and focus internationally instead of domestic U.S.
That's what I've heard as well.
Yeah. So very, very interesting. So tell us about your journey. So, I mean, where are you in your career right now? How'd you get here? How did you get into this fun industry? Tell us a bit about that.
Okay. Well, I'm a mechanical engineer by education. I graduated in 2010 from the University of Louisiana in Lafayette. In my time at UL, we are in the middle of oil field culture down here. But I didn't get much in the way of the education. It's really focused on the mechanics, the basics of engineering, design, and all that goes with that. But I interned at Pathfinder here in town for Terry Frith, our president now at Gordon. At that time, he was a VP of assets, and he needed someone to come be an intern and write manuals for him for a semester. And so I did that. He liked me enough to keep me on full time when I graduated that May. And so when I started that summer in June, it was right at the time that Schlumberger was purchasing or acquiring Smith, which owned Pathfinder. So I came in right during the transition. I got a few good years before any major upset to, the Pathfinder culture, Pathfinder way of doing things. But I worked for Terry in that position for 3.5 years as basically a district engineer, or helping with sustaining some R&D locally on the products we had out of that facility. It was a great, well-rounded experience where I had exposure to both operations, R&M and engineering from Terry's perspective, and that was very valuable. He retired from that position in 2013. I went on to move into a quality type role, basically put in charge of all the Pathfinder legacy tools and watching over their failures and reliability, and interacting between R&M and engineering in Houston. That was my role as a local engineer in Lafayette. And that was a very good role. I got a real appreciation for what reliability is, exposed to some new concepts, data analysis tools, how to understand failure modes, dig into those kinds of things. Got to experience, FMEA, through a seminar at Schlumberger. FMEA, what does that stand for now? I can't remember.
Finite element analysis?
No, it was, I really shouldn't have said it if I couldn't remember the acronym. I'll figure it out later. But it's about digging into failures. It's a method of, that's it. Yeah, and so it's kind of a long-term improvement system for an existing technology, right? You would take a mature technology and dig into all of its failure modes, breaking it down in the ways that can fail, the jobs that's supposed to do, and really get into the nitty-gritty of it. It's an exhaustive process, but it was revealing and something I learned from for sure. So from Schlumberger, I went from that office on Pinhook or in Lafayette to the D&M facility in Youngsville, which is the offshore facility for Schlumberger. Worked there for just 4 months before I fell victim to the 2016 layoffs. From there, I bounced around to a couple different locations or jobs in engineering before Terry called me up in 2017 to come work for him at Gordon. So Terry called me in 2017. I believe Gordon had just been acquired by Pelican, the private equity firm, and he had the green light to hire people he needed. And I was first on his list. I'm proud to say that. So I came in November 17, late 17, to basically work on R&D projects with him. But one of the things that I brought with me, since my experience at Schlumberger, was this eye towards reliability, statistics, and data analysis. And it was kind of more of a hobby than a main job for me at the time. But it's since grown to a point where we are offering and using the data we're gathering to not only drive our quality improvements for our tools, reliability improvements for engineering of our patented technologies, also pushing out improvements to our vendors. But we're using this data in marketing and sales to drive Gordon's name into the marketplace. We have fantastic reliability, and we've got to brag on it. So that's become a bigger part of my job here at Gordon, along with R&D. So developing tools like PWD for Gordon, azimuthal gamma ray, working on things like acoustic telemetry with you guys, and a real-time hard link data link. These are things that are kind of currently in the works. So yeah, it's been a good career. About 11 years I've been doing this, and it's been exciting. I've been through, I think, 2 downturns, which is, I feel like it's accelerating. I hope that's not true.
At one time, we were the new generation with the missing middle generation, right? They talked about that a lot. And, now we're, time is going way too fast, and we're going to be the old generation before we know it, right? So I have to ask, how well do you think college prepared you for real engineering in the real world? Did you feel like it really did a good job and gave you some good fundamentals? Or did you feel like, oh my gosh, you just throw all that out and learn the real way to do it when you got there?
Okay, I think fundamentals are there, right? Your basic maths, your understanding of sciences, you get that. But when it comes to industry-specific things, of course not, right? But what I think it proves is that you have the capacity to learn, the capacity to stand up against something difficult, a challenging curriculum or whatever else. And that's in itself good for your resume for a future employer, right? It's enough. And so, yeah, I got the fundamentals, but had to relearn a lot of things working for Terry. working for Schlumberger and Pathfinder, having to learn everything. I mean, you come in as an engineer thinking you can change the world, and you know nothing. You're not even valuable until like 18 months in, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I was just the king of the world at first, cashing those checks and not doing hardly anything. Glorified technical writer is what I felt like.
Well, it's funny you mentioned manuals, and I had a chuckle when you said that was what you started off doing, because man, manuals are a pain in the butt. Like it is.
Yeah.
It is amazing how hard it is to write a good manual. You think that, I developed a good product or prototype or whatever, the manual should just write itself, right?
Right.
No, they're like, there's a whole lot of hard work waiting for you at that manual stage to get a really good one, right? And a lot of people, and we've definitely been guilty of this, is just don't do enough, right?
Right. Now we do the same thing. I mean, I think it's a little bit of a product of, maybe you get to a point where, well, at first you start, you're like, I'm going to do this manual, it's going to be great. And you put a lot of time into it, and many, many man hours. You got the pictures, you got the diagrams, the correct instructions, the revision history, everything's in there, right? And at some point you graduate in your mind to a point where you're designing now and you're producing a commercial product. And now like the minutia of writing a manual and then tracking changes becomes almost too much to bear. And it's just like, it's such a Herculean task to move my mind into that place where I can sit down and do that. I guess that's why you hire engineers to do it for you. I don't know.
It's definitely a mental thing for me as well.
It's a mental thing.
I mean, like, that's not very fun usually, but it is really important.
It's very important.
Well, and I think as engineers, we have a tendency to look at it and say, that's not the real work, right? Like manual, it's just a follow-up work. That's why it should be easy, or that's why an intern should be able to do it, right? Like it's not, the real work is designing the components. The real work is making the circuit,
Right.
And I think that is an unfortunate bias that engineers tend to have that is not reality. I think, I certainly everybody's a little bit guilty, I think, of a little bit of self-importance, but I think engineers have a pretty bad case of engineering is the most important thing, and sales, marketing, administration, accounts payable, technical writing, those guys are just there to facilitate the engineering getting out into the world, right? It's all secondary to the engineering. I'm not saying that's how you are. I think a lot of engineers are that way.
I think it's a common bias, and it's unfortunate because the engineering process, having that deliverable, having that technician facing document, or whomever's going to be consuming that document, that's part of the whole thing. I mean, you've got to deliver on that because you are the most, if you're the designer and the person who may be leading the project, you're the most intimately aware of the details of this assembly and of this product. And if you can't communicate, efficiently how to service it or how to take it apart or whatever it is, how to even just test it, what have you done for the past 6 months?
Well, and this is what, really, I think kind of stems from or at least is a source of my passion for building products that go out and impact the world, right? Because like any engineer can build a good prototype in the lab, right? Like that's a particular art, like getting one working on the bench, right? But you have to master so many other skills besides engineering, right? Manual writing, communications, marketing, sales, administration, corporate partnerships, vendor relationships, finances. You have to master and have all those things intersect and come together for that wonderful piece of engineering that you've created to go out into the world and truly impact it and do it at a large scale, right? There's so much more that you have to go through. And otherwise, it's just ivory tower, right? It's just a cool prototype that stayed on the bench or in your mind or in SolidWorks or whatever on your computer, that could have been great, right? But all those things come together is just such a hard bar, and it's really fun thing for me to chase after, right? So as you were describing your journey, you talked about like doing things the Pathfinder way when you guys were there. And I know that can often be kind of hard to quantify, the Pathfinder way, the Intel way, the Apple way, the Google way, whatever, kind of the technology companies that have their culture and everything else. Like, if you can for us, like, what can you capture? What can you communicate about like the Pathfinder way of doing things that just worked?
Okay, well, I can try. When I got to Pathfinder, it was on the tail end of it being Pathfinder before it became a Schlumberger company. But I got to experience, 2, 3 good years of a culture that hadn't changed much. And what I can tell you is that we had a people there who were, had grown from a small company. They'd grown quickly to a large company of over 2,000 employees and had gone worldwide. But there was still a very strong sense of service and quality and kind of that small business attitude towards the customer, and not so much the corporate way of doing things. And I guess that was unique even for such a big company as Pathfinder. And so that kind of comes into Gordon because we were able to hire a lot of those same legacy Pathfinder guys, technicians, operations personnel, field engineers, because as Gordon was coming up in 15 and into 16, that was when all the layoffs were happening. So, we got all these guys free from, non-compete contracts and everything else, being laid off or being fired or whatever else it was, got them, to come work for us. High quality people who we knew and had relationships with. And so it's really been kind of the foundation of our group over here at Gordon is this expansion off this Pathfinder labor base. And, at Gordon, we have a very familial culture here and atmosphere. But, it's one that continues this attitude towards the customer of, we're here to serve them. We're here to make them most successful. And I hate to contrast or disparage the big companies like Big Blue, but it was very corporate. And, and you've heard that there's a Schlumberger way of doing things. And it's true. I still have lots of friends over there, but I'm not sure how many are very happy.
It's tough, right? And you hear that a lot. And there are definitely a lot of big companies that have kind of a corporate culture that are really effective. But I really think that just comes down to just having a great product mindset, right? And Elon Musk was talking recently about like the disadvantages of like MBA-ification, right? So sorry to everybody who has an MBA, but there's too many finance guys, too many spreadsheets, not enough product guys, not enough passion, right? And so, it's tough to sum it up, right? Anytime you try to, the guy who wrote, I think it was either Guy Kawasaki or it was the guy who wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad. He said like, anytime you go and try to find, people always like attend like a lecture or a seminar or whatever on how to be successful in business or how to do things the right way or how to build the right product, right? And they're always hoping when they go in there, and this kind of like counts like 3 out of 4 people out, that there's some easy secret sauce that can be just bestowed upon them. It's like, oh, here, let me tell you the real secret. Here's the secret about how we do it. Right? You just got to do this. But the reality is that just doesn't exist, right? Because success and good products is the culmination of so many things. Like there's just no, and it really could be pointed at just kind of doing everything the right way, right? And we're doing everything well. And so, a lot of people are often disappointed when there's no secret. And that, to some extent, that kind of quantifies why is it hard to, say like what was the Pathfinder way, right?
Right.
It's interesting. I just think a lot of these big companies have just lost their way, right? Okay, this is going to get a little political on you here, right? But the opponents of capitalism, so people who are like anti-capitalist, they paint this doomsday picture of these mega companies accumulating all the capital, then squashing all the competition, and blah 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 blah. I think one thing that they fail to underestimate is the power of human incompetence, and
which is very strong.
Well, if you think about it, like go back 100 years. If you go back 100 years and you say, guys, in 100 years, Sears Roebuck will be a shadow of their former selves and on the verge of bankruptcy. And if you said that today about Amazon, you guys said Amazon, in 100 years, Amazon will totally lose their way. They'll be a shadow of their former self. They'll be nothing. They'll be a husk, right? You call people, you someone said that, you'd call them crazy. You'd say, no, there's no way. I mean, Sears is so successful. There's no way that they can't continue to be successful forever into the future, right? But here we are, right? And so even as these big companies get really, really big, I mean, it's almost a ongoing continuous challenge the bigger you get to not just die from your own size, right? Like it's so hard managing 5 people, much less 550 or 500 or 5,000 or God forbid, 500,000, which I think some of the biggest companies in the world are like a millionish people. I think Foxconn and Walmart are of that size, right?
Yeah.
And then you talked about, it was kind of funny. You alluded to kind of coming in at the end, and I guess it's just kind of a given that like when the small passionate company gets bought and makes great products, that ultimately the culture from the big co will come in and sort of ruin it, right? Yeah. And it's very interesting. I'm actually a big fan of computer history, and so Pixar and Disney was a really interesting story to read. And one of the ways that when Disney bought Pixar that they fended this off is they had in a contract, they had 50 culture points that as a term and condition of the acquisition of Pixar, Disney had to enforce these culture points forever, right? And one of them was like, Disney is not allowed to remove the pool tables in the Pixar office, right? Yeah. And so they actually they recognized that, and they put up this massive contractual wall to preserve their culture as best they could, right? And I think it's actually kind of flipped around to where they were, Disney had kind of fallen so far, and Pixar was so full of talent that they kind of ended up kind of getting on top from a culture perspective and kind of putting their kind of pushing their culture through Disney versus the other way around. But it's still a really interesting story, and it's a massive challenge, right? I mean, anyways.
Well, it's not surprising if you think about that. I mean, just that one example. Who has a more attractive culture, Pixar or a corporatized Disney? If you can't change it, it's going to disseminate. It has to.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? So, I hope one day I have the high class problem of trying to figure out how to keep culture good at 1,000-person company. We'll see. I hope so. So you also said one more thing that really caught my ear, which is you said what reliability really is, or what real reliability is, right? And I was hoping you could expand upon that, right? Because you'd think reliability just means reliability, right? Like it just works, right? But
not breaking. When
you put that word real in front of it, like that word real means something other than just what it says on its face. So can we talk about that for a second?
Sure. I mean, I guess what I meant there was, there is the reliability of your car turning on every day, right, and getting you to work. And I drive an old car, and because I'm cheap, and it gets me to work every day. It ain't pretty, and as long as it does that basic functions, I can probably get along, right? But then there is the incremental failures of things that you expect from that vehicle, whether it's paint chipping or something even bigger, like in Louisiana, if the AC stops working, those, while the car still runs, it's failing to provide a service to you that's pretty key, keeping you comfortable in your vehicle. And so to take that analogy and move it into like MWD, we look at failures in light of the customer, right? At first, okay, did the tool issue did it affect the customer negatively? Pull out a hole for MWD? Did we fail to provide them the service they asked for or expected? But then there's the reliability towards Gordon as the consumer or as the purchaser of the product and the owner of the product. So maybe that gamma issue didn't cause a pull-out hole failure. Maybe we drilled ahead to section TD, we pulled out a hole and changed the gamma, and no big deal. But
maybe the NWD hand copied the gamma from the offset well log.